He is the host of The Ramsey Show. It is syndicated across this great land and has been for decades one of the most successful radio shows in America. He's also the host of the Entree Leadership Podcast, the founder and CEO of Ramsey Solutions. He's the best-selling author. He is Dave Ramsey. What's up, Dave? Great to have you on the Will Cain Show.
Honored to be with you, sir. Thank you for having me.
I'm a big fan, Dave, and not just when most people say they're a big fan, they mean it in a couple of ways. They mean it sycophantically. They mean it as in they like what you have to say. But I'm also a big fan in the business and the empire that you have built in the media. And as somebody else who is also in this industry, I look at you as someone unique and interesting in a world chasing virality and clicks. You've built a legitimate business. And I want to get into that with you here today. I have genuine curiosity and fandom on what you've been able to build with Ramsey Solutions. But let me start with this. I've got a president, I've got many economists, I've got friends in banking who talk about a soft landing, that we're going to be fine, that the economy is on the mend. I've got others who point out we can't tame inflation, and therefore we can't bring down interest rates. And if we can't bring down interest rates, a bottomless pool of debt is going to come due and cause bankruptcies and forcing us into a recession. So I know you deal with how individuals and personal finance should position themselves in the economy. So I think I just want to start with, can you let us know, what do you think? Where are we in this economy?
You know, it's kind of weird. There's segments of it that are just struggling and suffering and hopeless, and there's other parts that are just booming. It's a weird, usually like everything's bad, going bad, and, we've got dark clouds or the sun is out, one of the other usually. But this has got segments of everything, and it's still, I think the disruption in the economy from the pandemic is still rippling through. We're still seeing some of the tail end of those waves moving through. The current administration is just, they're asleep at the wheel on the things that they could do or could have done all along. And there's just some forces that are happening out here that are just wild. So there's some things to be hopeful about, but there's also some things that are really scary.
Well, we have to understand where we are to understand where we're going, but also to help us inform the decisions we make as individuals. And again, I think that's what you've done for decades, is give people good advice on how to deal with their own financial decision making. But at the core of often your message, and I think at the core of a macroeconomic situation, is the role of debt. And I live in Dallas, Dave, and real estate is booming in Dallas and has been for quite some time. There's a ton of people moving to Texas. But there's a lot of real estate out there that is, being built, all of it, on the back of debt. And with your interest rates staying so high, I think everybody's just nervous. So, all of us sitting here owning homes, all of us, I'm sure, listening, against your best advice, Dave, have credit cards. All of us have some measure of debt. So how do we think about debt right now in 2024?
Well, debt equals risk. More debt equals more risk. Less debt equals less risk. It's a pretty simple grandma's formula, live on less than you make idea. And of course, that's what we've become known for at Ramsey and have talked about, like you said, for decades. So that's true in your personal life. I mean, and it's true in our mortgages on our homes, or some commercial builder building an office building today. I mean, more debt equals more risk. And so when there are ripples through the economy, when there are minor tremors of earthquakes and people get scared, then it wakes them up and they say, oh, I need less debt. And so, yeah, that's exactly where we are. But we're at record levels on credit card debt. We're at record levels on car loans. We're at record levels on mortgages. And, 6% interest is high compared to 3%, but it's really low compared to 10%. And we've had boom economies at 9 and 10% interest and 8% interest. And so the interest rate in and of itself is not what's driving the housing market. The shortage of inventory is what's driving the housing market. In Dallas and Nashville, where I live, and these cities in Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, where people have moved to when they moved away from some of these other disasters that they lived in. We're seeing this huge migration, probably the largest in American history, if you don't count like the Dust Bowl and some things like that. But it's crazy. So that demand in your market or my market versus the number of houses available, simple supply demand, a lot of people chasing very few houses, drives the price up. It always has on any good and service. Anytime you got a shortage, you're always going to see a price increase. And so that's where the real estate boom is coming from, is we have a lack of inventory. And the weird thing is, builders are not, the new housing starts aren't there. And I was with a home builder this morning having coffee, and I'm like, dude, I mean, if you would build in the right price range, you could sell every single thing you built right now. Oh, well, interest rates are high. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a shortage. There's a huge shortage.
Well, so one of the things that people talk about, Dave, is a generational problem in home ownership. And I'm curious about this on two fronts with you. Home ownership has always been sold to us as, the fundamental building block of wealth creation. That's the best way to begin building wealth. A, do you believe that? And B, what about these younger generations that feel like they're being boxed out of homeownership, whether or not it's Gen Z or even millennials, which I believe are now in their 30s, millennials, who have either because of a shortage of inventory or because, harder access to loans, having trouble buying homes. Like this seems to be becoming a bigger political issue. Like, I can't access the American dream.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is this. Anytime you have a financial crisis in your personal life, or even if you're looking at a macro situation like we're talking about, you cannot analyze the whole subject based on the current snapshot. You can take a picture today and say, Gen Z is screwed on home buying, because it's really tough for them. The current house price, the current interest rate has grown way faster than their wages have grown. And so, like you said, it's boxing them out. And there's a lot of them are buying houses. A lot of them are figuring it out. A lot of them are on an individual basis are working their way through it. But as a macro statement, it's tough right now for Gen Z. But if you take a snapshot and say, okay, that's it, they'll never get a house. Well, that's being a drama queen. Because at that point, you're saying this moment in time is all that's ever going to be. And if you've got a crisis in your personal life, you just filed bankruptcy, you're going through a divorce, well, that's it. Snapshot, worst time of my life, that's all I'm ever going to have. Of course not. Things are always going to get better, they're always going to get worse. If you took a snapshot of the baby boomers, my generation, in 1983, interest rates were 17%. Baby boomers were boxed out of the housing market. They couldn't buy a house. You couldn't afford it. But that was just a snapshot. It was a moment in time. So what will happen with this inventory situation, what will happen with these interest rate situation that we're in today, is it will change. There will be a time that you will not be boxed out. It's not a permanent equation. That's drama queen stuff.
Out of curiosity, Dave, what do you think about the commercial real estate sector? And this goes back to your point about COVID. I hear you on, let's take a macro look. Let's broaden the time horizon on home ownership. But have something fundamental changed with COVID where, people aren't going back into the office, and our demand and our need for these high rises and these towers and these office parks aren't what they once were? And so we've got a bunch of commercial real estate now sitting there distressed, waiting to pop because of interest rates. Like, what do you think has changed when it comes to how we work after COVID?
Well, obviously, more people are working at home than ever before, other than during the actual lockdown itself. But the question is whether you believe, again, a snapshot or a film strip. If you take a snapshot at this moment, you'd say, well, owning an office building is a ridiculous idea because everyone's working from home. Well, they're not, okay? They're not. I got 1,100 folks on our team. We work at work. All of us are here. I don't turn on Zoom. I hate it. I want to meet with human beings in person and have actual meetings with humans. And because I can feel what's going on in the room, I can smell the air, I know what's up, the body language, everything's different when you're not doing it digitally. So anyway, and we're seeing a trend of work from work. We're seeing a lot of people move that direction. But overall, there's a move to work from home. And there's a request by the Gen Zs and the millennials to work from home more than ever. The number one reason we've lost team members in the last year, turnover, very low turnover, but the number one thing is they want work-life balance in air quotes, and I'm going to work from home. Translation, I'm really not going to put in an eight-hour day. I really want to be at home with my family and we're going to call that work from home. So I want to change to a part-time job and get paid for a full-time job. That's what is actually occurring. The problem with that is it's not sustainable for companies because the productivity sucks. So there's a few things you can do, work from home, that the productivity doesn't tank, but anything that's creative and vision and groupthink, and we're working on a project together, pushing things through, all of that work from home sucks at. If you want to write code, you can do that from your bedroom. That's fine. It's a task thing. But if you want to design the program and lay out for the guy that's writing the code, you probably need to be in the office. And so anyway, I think office buildings, if they're going down in value in some markets, are going to be a good buy. I'm probably going to buy some of them.
Oh, and I would assume those markets are the ones you talked about earlier, the places people are moving to, Texas, Florida, Tennessee.
I'm not going to buy an office building in an area where the government, the local government, was draconian during the lockdowns and way overreached. I'm going to buy an office building in an area where there's freedom and where people freaked out about work from home, and so they think office buildings are tanking and they're going to give it away. Well, I'll take it if you're going to give it away.
You know, you brought up, and I love zooming out as you point out, like the whatever we're going to call this. Once the history books write what happened, I don't know, maybe from 2015 through 25 or 30, the Great Migration. I immediately thought of the migration from the South to the North when you had the Industrial Revolution and urbanization and Jim Crow. You had all kinds of things pushing people to the urban centers like Chicago and New York and so forth. And you've got something similar happening now. I mean, it's quasi-political, very economic, also quality of life and freedom, to your point. It'll be a moment when we zoom out and the history books write about this, that they're going to say, look how many, I don't know how it compares historically. When you said that, all of a sudden I wanted to know, how does this compare to the great migrations of the past? But we're probably in the middle of one of these great migrations.
Yeah, we may be on the tail end of it, because I don't know how many more will leave New York or California, but if you read the maps that the Census Bureau is putting out and you look at the data, the numbers are horrendous of the people that have left government areas that are overreaching and were draconian during the lockdowns. They're leaving high taxes because they know they'll do it again. They know at the first blink that they'll do all those things again, and so they're out of there. I got a buddy of mine that left L.A. and he's been there his whole life. And but in the first year in Nashville, he paid cash for a house with the taxes he saved by leaving California. So we're seeing a lot of that everywhere. And I think you're right. I think it's going to show up in the history books because all the thinkers and the doers, the people that earn big money, are leaving. And they're relocating. And so what that's going to do to those markets is pretty incredible.
So I want to then go back to the advice you would give us as individuals. I want to ask you about two concepts. You rolled them one into the same, but I'm actually going to separate them for one moment. So I think in order to access home ownership, everyone, including you, acknowledges debt is an essential part of the picture of buying a home. Very few people can pay cash for their home. But still, your advice is solid. I mean, you've had the envelope theory, the snowball theory, pay off small debts, save cash, budget with envelopes, and so forth. What, in your estimation, Dave, from a family, for an individual, is a good use of the tool of debt? I mean, it's a tool, and it can help wealth creation. It can also be, I guess, a drug, that we continue to inject into our bloodstream that we get addicted to. But what's a good use of debt, personally, personal finances?
I don't think there is one. I disagree. So I have found that being 100% debt-free and staying that way leads to wealth creation faster than anything else you can do. Meanwhile, lowering risk, increasing the quality of your relationships. Most people's careers blossom because they're not stuck in a toxic work environment because they have to pay payments to some idiot that they bought a car from. And so, the things that it does, the ways it frees up your life, the quality of your life increases. Even we see hypertension and we see medical results of getting out of debt and staying out of debt. So there's a whole lot more than a simple math. And when you stress test your idea, when you put it up against a really tough time, again, we referenced the pandemic or something, it feels like it was 20 minutes ago, but it's 5 years ago. But 4 years ago. But if you stress test stupid, you see what happens. And so this idea that I can borrow and not worry about it, and it's not a big deal, everybody does it, it's a tool and all that. Well, when you lose your job or when you can't go to work and they furlough you, when things happen, when you have a car wreck, when cancer's in the family, all of these things come up. When you stress tested it, you see what Warren Buffett said is true, that when the tide goes out, you can tell who was skinny dipping. And so, right. We don't recommend debt on a house. We tolerate it with our callers and say, okay, don't take out more than a 15-year fixed rate only, where the payment's no more than a fourth of your take-home pay, and get that sucker paid off as fast as you can, because all the data that we have says two things creates the first $1 million to $5 million of net worth. The first time you become a millionaire, it's a paid-off house and a well-funded 401k and Roth IRA. So funding your retirement in good mutual funds and getting your house paid off is where we find most millionaires are coming from in America.
Paying off your home and funding your 401k. Those are the two best paths simple, to your first million.
Just simple. Yeah, we did a study, the largest study of millionaires ever done. We studied 10,167 of them, and that's the typical model we find. They're $1.5 million net worth. They got a $700,000 paid-for house. They got $800,000 in their 401k, and they're 46 years old, and they're a millionaire. And so that's what we found over and over and over again.
Now, the second concept I wanted to ask you about, Dave, is one that you rolled one and the same, somewhat. I want to ask you about risk. You said debt is risk, but there's other types of risk beyond debt. So I once read a book, Dave, when I first started out in my career, I pursued a very entrepreneurial path. I owned small town newspapers in Texas. I had a Latino media business. And I was interested in Warren Buffett, by the way. He's one of the guys that led me down into that industry. And there was a guy named Al Newharth who started USA Today. He was the CEO of Gannett newspapers back in the day. And he said he used to encourage his children to take one great risk before the age of 30. And his rationale was, before the age of 30, you can rebound easier than after the age of 30. You acquire responsibilities, wives, children, whatever it may be. You acquire more responsibilities the older that you get. I'm curious what you would say to people in their 20s, in their 30s, about how they should manage risk when it comes to going for it, whatever it may be in their career, versus the safety of that W-2, that paycheck, that putting money away into that 401k. I'm curious if you have some type of lesson or maxim you talk about when it comes to taking risk in your career.
Yeah, I think taking risk the rest of your life is a good thing. It makes you alive. It's adventurous. It's a good thing. But the rule I use for risk in business or career management or those kinds of things comes from Jim Collins, our friend that wrote the book Good to Great. And he says before you shoot a cannonball, which takes a lot of powder and is a big deal, shoot muskets and make sure that you can get your target aligned. And so take risks with smaller things, smaller bites. So you don't have to take a risk and say, if this doesn't work, I'm bankrupt, but I'm going for it. You don't have to do that. That's not necessary in today's world. You can start side gigs, you can start side hustles. A lot of things that we do in today's world, an entrepreneur, we coach a lot of entrepreneurs, about 10,000 small businesses, and we tell them take small risks, but take a risk every day. So for some people, the idea that I would ever leave the quote unquote safety of a W-2 job and opening a business is an anxiety-producing statement. Just to say that, they get all tight, But that's not. I definitely would do that. But just to go in and quit and have no idea, or I'm going to go $150,000 in debt to open a restaurant and I've never cooked anything that anybody bought, that's people do that crap. That's not risk. That's foolish. That's rash. And so calculated risk, where we calculated and we got alignment with the musket balls first. And so, you've had a catering business running out of your basement for 4 years, and you're already making with that on the side what you used to make at work. Well, now it's time to open a restaurant maybe. But I've never cooked anything, and I heard somebody say once at my barbecue that I ought to open a barbecue restaurant. Well, crap, just meet everybody in Texas, right? I mean, come on. That's ridiculous. So, no, you don't do that.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of biographical stuff that I'm curious about now as well. Your lesson and your advice when it comes to debt is hard earned. I mean, it's through your life experience, not just academic, right? In the '80s, early in your career, I guess you learned the lessons of debt the hard way.
Well, I did. I grew up in the real estate business, and one of the things in the real estate business they do is they take your risk meter out and hit it with a hammer and break it, where you no longer measure risk at all. It's just everything's good. All debt is good. Borrow all you can, buy all you can, and the nothing down real estate movement, it's not new because of TikTok. It's been around for a while. It's not new because of everybody that's renovating a show on cable TV. But yeah, I was doing Flip This House before Chip and Joanna were born. So we were, I mean, they're great people. But I mean, I was 22 years old. I bought my first house, and I bought it 100% debt. I didn't have any money. And I flipped it, and I made a little money, and I did that over and over again. I made money, and then I had $1.2 million out with one bank, and I had about $3 million worth of debt total. And I was flipping, and I owned a bunch of rentals at the time too. And I had grown $1 million net worth by the time I was 24 years old, and 25 years old. And so I was making $200,000 a year in 1983, which is probably like $500,000 now. You know, I mean, it's a lot of money, especially for a hillbilly kid like me. And but the bank got sold to another bank, and some guy in another city looked down and said, "There's a kid in Nashville owes us $1.2 million, and he's flipping houses. This looks scary. Let's limit this relationship," which is banker talk for screw him and ruin your life. So they called our notes, and we spent the next 2.5 years of our life losing everything we owned. And so we went straight up and straight down. There was no middle ground with any of that. It was a wild ride. So yeah, I've got a PhD in DUMB. I know what stupid looks like. I've looked at it in the mirror. And so, you know, I mean, and we hit bottom at age 28 and got the opportunity to start again and try to learn from our lessons. And that's when I started studying old rich people, and not young rich people. I had been him. I didn't want his opinion. But I started talking to people with gray hair and no hair, and they said, live on less than you make, have a budget, stay out of debt. It's the tortoise versus the hare.
Well, you looked, whatever you said, dumb in the mirror, and from the outside, from a distance, it looks like that's in the rearview mirror now. I'm sure you still make your mistakes. Everyone does.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, about your media business. And this is the part where I started, and I'm a fan of. You know, I've been in this business for a while, Dave. I've been at it as an entrepreneur. I owned, as I mentioned, a chain of small-town newspapers. I've raised money and started national magazine. I've been a W-2 employee of big corporations like Disney and Fox. And one of the things that I've learned, and I feel really confident about this, is that when it comes to where the media is headed, nobody in the hell knows where the answer is. They don't have any idea of the future of the media.
I completely
No
agree.
one. No CEO, no billionaire, no one. They know how to destroy. We've figured out how to destroy old businesses like newspapers, and we're on our way with cable television perhaps. But they haven't figured out how to create the next big thing, despite the fact that we get viral sensations and people with a lot of followers. But you've done something unique, and I think somewhat off the map in terms of, you know, the online relevance and virality, Dave. You've got a real ongoing concern. You've got a real media business. Now, you got into it with syndicated radio in the 90s, which is one of the best businesses ever. Built Rush, built Howard, built you. But I'm curious, as you've invented and reinvented this media company, what do you think? I mean, what I'm just curious your mindset on the media. Beyond agreeing with me, nobody knows what tomorrow holds. You're building something that seems to be lasting the test of time.
You know, what we figured out early was that we are not in the media business. And as long as we keep our head straight about that, then we're okay. It keeps us from going down a rabbit hole somewhere. We're in the content delivery business. We help people by teaching them. Now, what format can we teach them in? Well, I can write books. That's a format. I can do live events from stage with 5,000 people in the audience. That's a format. We've used both of those, still use both of those. And then we got into talk radio, backed into it accidentally at a perfect timing. I couldn't have dreamed up the timing. It couldn't have been any better. And have scratched and clawed through that business and grown it and put up with all the weird stuff that is radio. And 680 stations now. It's crazy. So But what we figured out all along was when SiriusXM, or XM and Sirius, are two different companies, put two satellites in the air for 150 million each, or two sets of satellites, we went on both of them. And everybody said, "Oh, you can't do that." I said, "Well, we just did it, and your affiliates are all going to be pissed on terrestrial." Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going on both of them. I'm in the content delivery business, and that makes me platform agnostic. And so I'm not going to bet the farm, talk about risk, on one platform. And so, you know, we screwed around with YouTube and messed with it in the early days, and it kind of limped along. And then in the last 36 months, it's become a huge platform. A guy walked in my office and said, he had this crazy idea, I don't know, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. He said, you know, broadband is here, dial-up is gone. We need to do one of these podcasts. And I said, what's a podcast? And he's like, whatever. And I'm like, well, okay, but I'll try it, I guess. Well, nobody in talk radio wanted to do them because they were all worried about their affiliates or worried about putting up a paywall or whatever. We didn't put up a paywall. We just put it out there. And it's huge. I mean, we've had, we're number 1, 2, 5, somewhere in there, bouncing around on Apple now. 1 billion downloads. It's crazy. But we're platform agnostic because that'll go away. It'll be MySpace someday.
Right.
And it'll change. And so I'm not going to bet the farm on one. We're on everything all the time. And if anyone wants to be pissed off, then I'm just not going to be able to be on it because we're not giving you an exclusive. And that's
by the way, really quickly, Dave,
that's given us the foundation to grow and change. And so,
right.
I mean, someday I'll be a freaking hologram in your living room. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Well, do you feel any pressure? We'll leave it with this last bit here. Do you feel any pressure to be early? Meaning, Rogan gets to podcasts early and he benefits from that, for being real. And a lot of guys get to YouTube early and they benefit from that because it's nobody's an overnight success. They grind, and then you explode, right, on these platforms. So whether or not that's TikTok or whatever's next, Dave, do you feel pressure? I got to be there early with my content?
We get there early just because we'll try anything. But again, we got on TikTok, and I hate it. I hate TikTok, but on a personal level. But it's fabulous for business. And it's, we just got back from a trip, and I was in Iceland, and a kid runs over to me, 23 years old. He goes, "You're that guy on TikTok." I mean, good God. Where else do you get that, So,
right.
it's, so yeah, we're going to be there early. But again, we're not going to put all our weight over there until the thing starts giving us reason to put weight on it. We're just going to touch it, just
right.
enter into it gradually. And that's why, even though we were on podcasts before Rogan, he kicked our butts in the podcast world. But overall, we kick his butt on the overall footprint. So, but again, he was trying to do that one thing, and he's the world's best at that. He's really good. Joe's show's incredible.
Right. Well, like you said, you've been the guy that somebody runs up to you and says, "I listened to you on radio." Now you're the guy. You're that guy from TikTok. So we get the point. When nobody knows where the industry's headed, you might as well be everywhere to see where it will go. It's been an awesome conversation, Dave Ramsey. We'll check you out, by the way, on TikTok, YouTube, radio, books, and everywhere else you are with Ramsey Solutions. Thanks so much for being on the Will Cain Show today, Dave.
Well, our honor to be with you. You guys are doing a great job. Thanks for having me.